In the dark of the night, when the streetlights flicker on, one by one, the shadows stretch long, we forget that monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they walk in broad daylight, smiling, shaking hands, and stealing trust with blue eyes and a charming grin. This is the story of a man whose face looked like that of an angel, but whose heart was darker than any night you could imagine. This is the story of Ted Bundy, a name forever tied to pure terror. He was charismatic, smart, good-looking, and for that exact reason, he became the most dangerous predator in American history. In this story, you'll see how an ordinary little boy turned into one of the most terrifying serial killers of the 20th century. You'll hear how he tricked, trapped, tortured, and killed over 30 young women. She wrote, "I loved Ted. I thought he was the man of my life. He was kind, intelligent, handsome. But sometimes, just for a moment, I would see something strange in his eyes, a coldness, a void. But I ignored it. I thought maybe he was tired, maybe stressed. I never imagined he was a killer. But does this mean we should be suspicious of everyone? Should we trust no one? No, that's not life. We need balance. Trust, but with awareness. Openness, but with vigilance. Living, but safely. One psychologist who studied Bundy's case later said, "Ted Bundy taught us that evil can be very charming. He taught us that we shouldn't just look at appearances, but at behaviors, patterns, and the feeling a person gives us. Because if something feels off, but beyond the individual lessons, Ted Bundy's story left deeper impacts on society. Impacts that are still felt decades after his death. One of his biggest influences was on popular culture. Before Bundy, serial killers were seen as backward, ugly, and easily recognizable. But Bundy proved that image wrong. He showed that a serial killer could be intelligent, educated, charming, and well integrated into society. This shift in perception made people more cautious. They now realized they couldn't judge someone solely by appearance. Danger could come from anywhere, even from someone with a friendly smile. The media also played a major role in this change. Bundy's trial was the first to be broadcast live on television. Millions of viewers watched every day, making Bundy a public figure, not a hero, but a recognizable personality. Unfortunately, this fame led some to admire him. Women wrote him letters. Some even fell in love. And one, Carol Ann Boone, married him in prison. They even had a daughter, a child whose father was a convicted serial killer. It was a shocking reality. How could someone fall in love with a killer? Psychologists call this phenomenon hybristophilia, being attracted to dangerous or criminal individuals. Some women feel they can change or save such people, or are drawn to the power and danger they represent. Carol Ann Boone later regretted it. She realized Bundy had manipulated and deceived her. After his execution, She changed her and her daughter's identities and disappeared. She didn't want her daughter to grow up carrying the burden of a father who was a monster. Bundy's case also had a lasting impact on the criminal justice system. It highlighted the importance of interstate cooperation. Before Bundy, states rarely shared information. After him, national systems were created to track crimes, identify patterns, and help police catch serial killers faster. New methods of criminal profiling also emerged. Psychologists began studying serial killers' behavior, recognizing patterns, and providing this data to law enforcement, which helped catch many later offenders more quickly. Perhaps Bundy's greatest impact was on women, especially young women. After his case, public awareness of potential dangers increased. Parents began warning their daughters, "Don't trust strangers. If something feels wrong, listen to your instincts. Always tell someone where you're going." Colleges improved security systems. Women's dormitories added stronger locks, installed cameras, and created night escort programs. Systems where students could request someone to accompany them after dark. Yet even with all these changes, danger still exists. Young women continue to disappear. Serial killers are still active in society. This reminds us that we can never be completely safe, but we can be vigilant. One of Bundy's victims, families created a charity after his death, a foundation that helps the families of crime victims. They wanted something positive to come from the tragedy, to ensure that their daughter and all of Bundy's victims would be remembered not for their deaths, but for their lives. One member of the foundation said, "We can't bring our daughter back, but we can make sure her memory lives on. We can help other families get through this pain, and we can make sure this never happens again." These efforts are inspiring. They show that even in the darkest moments, hope can emerge. Even when evil triumphs, goodness can rise again. But we mustn't forget that this hope came at a heavy cost. The lives lost, the families destroyed. The daughters who will never get a chance to live. And this is a cost we must never forget. Because when we forget, when we allow killers to become heroes in popular culture, when we make their stories seem more compelling than those of their victims, we are giving them power again. And that is exactly what they wanted from the start. So let us remember, not the name of Ted Bundy, but the names of Linda Healy, Denise Naslund, Janice Ott, Melissa Smith, Karen Campbell, Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Kimberly Leach, and the dozens of other victims whose names were never known. Let us remember that they were real people, with dreams, with hopes, with loves. They were young women who wanted to live, to learn, to grow, and to make the world a better place. And let us ensure that their legacy, not the legacy of their killer, is what endures forever. You'll watch with me as he escaped prison twice and even defended himself in court with a strange, unnerving confidence. And finally, you'll witness the moment justice caught up to him. the moment the electric chair was waiting. November 24th, 1946, Burlington, Vermont. The air was cold, and the first snow of winter had settled on the ground. Inside a small, modest house, a woman named Eleanor Cowell was giving birth. She was alone, no husband by her side, no family to support her, just a 21-year-old girl who had just found out she was pregnant, and the baby's father had walked away. When the baby arrived, Eleanor looked down at his tiny face. It was a boy. Blue eyes, light brown hair. She named him Theodore Robert Cowell, but everyone called him Ted. Eleanor couldn't keep Ted. The social shame of the time, family pressure, and all those judgmental stares pushed her into a hard decision. She left Ted with his grandparents in Philadelphia for a few months and went off chasing a better life. But years later, Ted himself said that those early days of his life were like poison slowly flowing through his veins. Ted's grandfather, Samuel Cowell, was a violent and cruel man. He abused his wife, his kids, even his dogs. He was racist, extreme, and sometimes flew into uncontrollable fits of rage. Ted's grandmother was deeply depressed and had undergone several rounds of electroshock therapy. In that house, grew up surrounded by yelling, violence, and heavy, suffocating silence. He saw his grandfather hit his grandmother. He saw pets get treated with brutal cruelty, and he learned that the world wasn't a place where you could afford to be weak. 1951. Ted was 4 years old. Eleanor decided to bring him back. She'd moved to Tacoma, Washington, and married a man named Johnny Culpepper. Johnny was a good man, calm, gentle, kind, but Ted never accepted him as a father. He felt betrayed. For years, people had told him his mother was his sister, and his grandparents were his parents. When he found out the truth, his little world just crumbled. At school, Ted was a quiet, withdrawn kid. His classmates later said he never really had any close friends. He preferred to be alone, sitting in the corner, watching others. But he was smart, really smart. His grades were high, and his teachers saw him as polite and gifted. Still, there was something in his eyes that gave people an odd, uneasy feeling. Something cold, something empty. When Ted hit his teenage years, something inside him woke up. He started stealing little things, worthless things, not for money, but for the thrill, the rush of power. He liked feeling like he could take something from someone without them ever knowing. At night, he'd sneak out, watch his neighbors' houses, peek through their windows. It excited him. It made him feel powerful, in control. But in high school, Ted tried to change. He joined the football team, tried to be popular, but deep down, he always felt like something was missing inside him. He couldn't really connect with anyone. He couldn't truly feel. He could only fake it. And he was damn good at faking it. 1967. Ted got into the University of Washington, majoring in psychology. He wanted to understand why people behaved the way they did. He wanted to understand why he was the way he was. But it was there, in that university that he met a girl who would change his life forever. Her name was Stephanie, a beautiful, smart girl from a wealthy family. She was everything Ted ever wanted, and he fell hard for her, or at least he thought he was in love. But after a while, Stephanie started to lose interest. She told Ted she felt like he had no real direction in life, no drive, no strength. Then she left him. For Ted, that wasn't just a breakup, it was betrayal. That sting of abandonment hit the same nerve that had been raw ever since he found out his own mother had left him behind. And this time, something inside him broke. Years later, when psychologists studied Ted Bundy's life, they pinpointed this as the turning moment. The moment he decided he'd never let anyone see him weak again. The moment he decided to take back control. And to him, control meant everything. Control over life, control over death. He went to law school. He started working at a suicide crisis hotline. He got involved in political campaigns. He made himself look like the perfect citizen, a model student, a kind, polite man. But at night, when the darkness rolled in, something else inside him came alive. He started following women, watching them, studying their routines, learning their habits, finding their weak spots. He was looking for a certain type. Girls with long brown hair, pretty faces, young and fresh. Girls who looked like Stephanie. And in the spring of 1974, his first victim vanished. Her name was Linda Healy, a 21-year-old student at the University of Washington. The night she disappeared, no one heard a sound. No one saw a thing. Just an empty bed, a blood-stained sheet, and a torn nightgown. It was like the earth had swallowed her whole, but that was just the beginning. Because Ted Bundy had only just started hunting. And he was a killer who moved like a shadow, vanished like smoke, and with every strike made the world a little darker. Back then, no one really knew what was happening. The cops thought the girls had run away, or that the disappearances were unrelated accidents. But as the number grew, a pattern started to show. Every victim was young, beautiful, long-haired, and all had vanished on moonless nights. During all this, Ted kept living his normal life. He grabbed coffee with friends, went to law school, even had a girlfriend, Elizabeth Kendall, a woman who truly believed he was the love of her life. She had no idea where he went on those late-night drives. No idea that the same hands that held her so gently were the ones that had taken innocent lives. Ted was a master of disguise. He knew how to talk, how to smile, how to make people trust him. His greatest weapon was his face. Handsome, harmless, trustworthy. He wore that face like a mask to get close to his prey. And when that mask came off, what was underneath was something no one could ever imagine. Summer of 1974, Lake Sammamish, a calm, beautiful spot near Seattle where families came to spend their weekends. It was July 14th, a warm, sunny day. People were sunbathing, girls in swimsuits, guys playing volleyball, families picnicking on blankets. Everything felt peaceful, normal. But that day, a young man walked among the crowd. One of his arms was in a cast, and he looked like he needed help. Neat brown hair, blue eyes, a kind smile. He approached girls who were sitting alone, asking softly for a hand. "Excuse me, could you help me out? My car's parked over there, and I can't load my boat by myself. Would you mind?" The girls looked at him, broken arm, sweet smile, those pleading eyes. How could anyone say no? Some of them agreed and walked away with him. And they never came back. Janice Ott, a 23-year-old student, was the first victim that day. She followed Ted toward the parking lot. His brown Volkswagen Beetle sat quietly in the corner. He opened the door and said, "My boat's inside. Could you help me pull it out?" Janice leaned in to take a look. And in that split second, Ted swung the metal rod he'd hidden in his good hand and struck her head. The sound was dull, lost in the noise of the lake. Janice collapsed. Ted pulled her into the car, slammed the door, and drove off fast. It all took less than 10 seconds. A few hours later, Denise Nasland, a 19-year-old student, met the same fate. She trusted Ted's smile, walked toward his car, and never came back. That evening, families went home, but Janice's and Denise's families waited. They called, searched, phoned the police, but there was no sign. Just two young women who seemed to have vanished off the face of the earth. Police found witnesses who'd seen a man with a broken arm, but no one could give a clear description. One said his hair was brown, another maybe blonde. Someone else, he had a kind smile. That's exactly how Ted wanted it. Fuzzy memories, blurred images no one could quite piece together. 2 weeks later, the police found the remains of Janice Ott and Denise Nasland in the mountains outside Seattle. The bodies were decomposed, parts eaten by wild animals. What was left told a story of brutal violence. Their skulls were smashed, bones fractured in multiple places, and no trace of their clothes or belongings was found. Detectives stood at the scene, staring down at scattered bones. One whispered, "This wasn't done by some regular guy. This was someone who enjoyed it." Meanwhile, Ted Bundy lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He didn't feel a thing. No regret, no fear, not even excitement. Just a deep, endless void that never filled up. He realized he'd have to do it again, because only in those moments, when he had total control, did he actually feel alive. But this was just the start of the storm. In the following months, Ted Bundy became a shadow stretching over Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Colorado. Wherever he went, girls disappeared, and every time the cops thought they were close, he slipped away like smoke through their fingers. Fall 1974, University of Utah, a quiet little college town near the Wasatch Mountains. It was the night of October 18th, cold, damp, and still. A 17-year-old girl named Melissa Smith left her friend's house and headed toward her dorm. The streets were dark, the streetlights dim, and the wind hissed through the trees. She walked fast, clutching her bag, head down. A brown Volkswagen pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and a man with a warm smile leaned out. "Excuse me, I'm a police officer. Can I see your ID? There's been a theft in the area, and we're checking everyone. Melissa looked at him. He was young, good-looking, confident. She figured he probably was a cop. She stepped closer. Sure, just a second. That's when Ted jumped out, grabbed her, and forced her into the car. She screamed, but he clamped a hand over her mouth and slammed her head against the dashboard. The sound was dull, swallowed by the dark. Then he drove off fast. He took her up into the mountains outside town. It was pitch black, dead quiet, no one around. He stopped the car, dragged her out. She cried, begged. Please, I didn't do anything. Please, just let me go. Ted looked at her. Her eyes were wet, face pale, hands trembling. But he didn't feel a thing. To him, she wasn't a person, just an object, a toy, something he could use however he wanted. He strangled her. Melissa fought, clawed at his arms, tried to breathe, but his grip only tightened and tightened until there was nothing left, just silence. Ted buried her body under the snow, got back in his car, lit a cigarette, turned on the radio, and drove back to the city, like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, in the dorm that night, Melissa's friends waited. They called, texted, searched. By morning, when she still hadn't shown up, they called the police. But Ted Bundy was already gone. Like a shadow, like a nightmare. A few weeks later, in Bountiful, Utah, another girl vanished. Her name was Laura Aim. She was a student too, with long brown hair. She met Ted one night, and just like that, she was gone. All they found was a pair of shoes by the highway. Nothing else. Utah police started digging into the case. They noticed a pattern. All the victims were young. All were college girls. All looked alike. And all had been seen near a brown Volkswagen. But there were thousands of brown Volkswagens in Utah. How the hell were they supposed to find one killer in that crowd? But Ted Bundy made a mistake. He thought he was untouchable, that he'd never get caught. On the night of November 16th, 1974, he tried to kidnap a girl named Carol Duranch. He told her he was a cop and needed to take her down to the station. But Carol had a bad feeling. She got in his car, but when Ted drove out of town instead of toward the police station, she knew something was off. Ted pulled over on the side of the road and tried to cuff her. She screamed and fought like hell. They wrestled, struggling in the car, until Carol managed to yank the door open and throw herself out. She hit the pavement hard, got up, and ran. Ted jumped out and chased her, but the sound of an approaching car forced him to back off. He ran back to his Volkswagen and took off. Carol stumbled to a nearby house, pounding on the door, crying and begging for help. The couple inside called the cops, and Carol told them everything about the brown Volkswagen. The man claiming to be a cop, his blue eyes, his friendly smile, and how he'd called himself Ted. It was the first time one of Ted Bundy's victims had survived and could actually identify him. The police launched a full-scale search, and a few months later, on the night of August 16th, 1975, an officer named Bob Hayward spotted a car prowling the streets of Salt Lake City with its headlights off. He followed it, and when the driver tried to flee, the chase was on. Ted Bundy was caught. When they searched his car, they found some seriously weird stuff. Handcuffs, rope, a knife, a ski mask, and a metal bar. Ted claimed they were just tools, said he hadn't done anything wrong. But the cops weren't buying it. They took him in. Carol Duranch picked him out of a lineup without hesitation. "That's him," she said. "I'm sure. That's the man from my nightmare." Ted Bundy was charged with kidnapping and attempted murder, but the police knew there was a lot more to a story. They started connecting the dots. Missing girls from Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado. And the pieces started to fit. But Ted still had a plan. He wasn't about to rot in a cell. He wasn't about to give up control. He knew there was a way out. He just had to wait for the right moment. In jail, Ted was allowed to review his case files with his lawyer. He kept claiming he was innocent, that it was all a big misunderstanding. But at night, alone in his cell, he'd think about the past, the girls' faces, their pleading voices, the moments he felt like a god, and he'd smile. Winter 1977, Aspen, Colorado. Ted Bundy was transferred to a courthouse there to stand trial for the murder of Karen Campbell, a 23-year-old college student who'd vanished back in 1975. In the courthouse law library, on June 7th, breaking into empty cabins for food, stealing clothes, stealing cars. He was on the run for 6 days before they finally caught him. In a small mountain town, Bundy was sent back to jail. This time, they tightened security. More guards, no more library privileges. But Ted was still plotting, still thinking. December 30th, 1977. Garfield County Jail, Colorado. New Year's Eve was near, and the guards had let their guard down. Ted had been planning for months. He'd lost weight so he could squeeze through the small vent in his ceiling. He'd found a drill, slowly chipped away at the ceiling, and waited. And that night, when the prison was dead quiet, Ted climbed up through the ceiling, crawled through the air ducts, and slipped out into the cold. He landed in the snow, put on the clothes he'd stolen, and started walking. He was free again. This time, he decided to go somewhere no one would know his face. He headed south to Florida. Florida, where it was warm, far away from Colorado, Utah, and Washington. A place where he could start over. But Ted Bundy couldn't stop. He was like an addict who couldn't kick the habit. He had to hunt again, had to feel that rush of power again. January 15th, 1978. The Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University in Tallahassee. It was 3 a.m. Everyone asleep. The building dead silent. The front door was locked. But Ted found a way in. With a piece of wood in his hand, he crept down the hallway toward the girls' rooms. He moved like a shadow. The first room he entered was where Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman slept. Two 20-year-old girls deep in their dreams. Ted went for Lisa first. He smashed her head with the piece of wood. Once, twice, again. She woke up, tried to scream, but the sound never came. Ted strangled her, beat her viciously, bit her, and then turned to Margaret. He did the same thing to her. Then he went into Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner's room. He attacked them too, but somehow, miraculously, both girls survived. After a few minutes, Ted slipped out of the building and vanished into the night. The next morning, when the others woke up, the scene was pure horror. Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman were dead, their faces crushed, their bodies covered in blood, human bite marks on their skin. Karen and Kathy were in the hospital, badly hurt, but alive. Cops jumped on the case immediately. Witnesses said they saw a man dressed in dark clothes leaving the building. One girl said she'd seen him too and thought he was just another student. Nobody knew it was Ted Bundy, the escaped killer from Colorado, now hiding out in Florida. Ted knew his time was running short. He knew the cops would catch up soon, but he couldn't stop. He needed another victim. February 9th, 1978. A small town called Lake City, Florida. A 12-year-old girl named Kimberly Leach left school to grab something from her car. She never came back. Witnesses said a man forced her into a white van and sped off. The description matched Ted Bundy. Police launched an immediate search. 3 days later, in Pensacola, Officer David Lee spotted an orange Volkswagen that looked stolen. He ran the plates. It was. He followed it. The driver tried to run, but finally pulled over. Officer Lee got out, gun drawn. Out of the car. Hands where I can see them. The man stepped out. Young, messy brown hair, tired eyes. Lee looked him over. "What's your name?" The man hesitated. "Ken Misner," he said, but Lee didn't buy it. He cuffed him and took him to the station. When they checked his fingerprints, the truth dropped like a bomb. It was Ted Bundy, the escaped serial killer, the man behind the disappearances of dozens of young women, the face of pure cruelty. Ted Bundy was caught again, but this time, he knew there was no way out. This time, justice wasn't let. Florida police knew this time was their golden chance. They had Ted Bundy, and this time, they weren't going to let him slip away again. They transferred him to Leon County Jail, a high-security facility where every move he made was watched, every word recorded, every breath counted. Ted sat alone in his cell, staring at the wall. He knew this time was different. He knew all the evidence was stacked against him. Witnesses, fingerprints, and the bite mark on Lisa Levy's body that perfectly matched his teeth. He knew this was the end of the line. But Ted Bundy still had one weapon: his sharp intelligence, his manipulative charm, and his unshakable confidence. He decided to defend himself in court. He wanted to show everyone he wasn't some wild killer. He was a smart man, a law student, a regular guy who'd just been wrongly accused. The interrogations began. Detectives came from all over the U.S. Washington, Utah, Colorado, Oregon. Everyone wanted answers for their unsolved cases. Everyone wanted to know how many more victims there were. The interrogation room was small and suffocating. A metal table, 2 chairs, a single bright light shining directly in Ted's face. Detective Robert Keppel from the Seattle Police sat across from him and dropped a thick folder full of photos and files on the table. "Ted, let's just talk, man. We know you did this. We've got evidence, witnesses, everything. There's just one question left. Why?" Ted smiled, a cold, emotionless smile. He looked straight into the detective's eyes and said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything wrong." Keppel opened the folder and started laying out photos of the victims, one by one. Ted glanced at the photos. His face didn't move. His eyes didn't show a flicker of emotion. He just stared, then said quietly, "What does Stephanie have to do with any of this?" "It's all." Ted stayed silent for a moment. Then he laughed, a soft, cold, empty laugh. "You're quite the amateur psychologist, detective. But you're wrong. I loved Stephanie. I never hurt anyone." Keppel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Ted, we compared your teeth to the bite marks on Lisa Levy's body. It's a perfect match. We found hair in your car belonging to Kimberly Leach. We have witnesses who saw you. You escaped twice. Why does an innocent man run?" Ted placed his hands on the table, fingers interlaced, and said calmly, "I didn't run. I just wanted to be free. I was trapped in an unfair system. I was innocent then, and I'm innocent now." "Then explain why there was bloody clothing in your car." "It wasn't blood. Maybe it was paint or..." "Ted, cut the crap." Keppel slammed his fist on the table. "You're a serial killer. You murdered dozens of women. And now you're trying to save yourself with lies. But you can't. We know everything." Ted kept his smile. "Detective, if you really knew everything, then why are you sitting here asking me questions? You've got nothing. Just a bunch of guesses." Keppel took a deep breath. He knew Ted was playing him, stalling, trying to take control. But Keppel wasn't going to let him. "All right, Ted, let's pretend for a second. Let's say it wasn't you. Say it was one of your friends. How do you think that person did it?" How did he lure those girls? Ted looked at Keppel. This was a game. A trap. But Ted couldn't resist. He loved talking about himself. Loved showing off his intelligence. Well, hypothetically, if someone wanted to do something like that, he'd have to be smart. He'd need to know how to talk to people, how to earn their trust. Maybe use a fake cast or pretend to be a cop. People trust cops, you know. And then what? Then he'd have to take them somewhere quiet, somewhere no one's around, where no one can hear. And then, well, he could do whatever he wanted. And that whatever? What does that include? Ted paused. His eyes drifted off, like he was thinking back to something. Then he said softly, "It includes anything that person wants it to include, because at that moment, that person has complete control. He can do anything, say anything, be anyone. He's God." A heavy silence filled the room. Keppel stared at Ted and realized he was sitting across from a true monster. This wasn't a game anymore. This was a hidden confession. "Ted, you enjoyed killing those girls, didn't you?" Ted looked back at him. The smile faded. His face turned serious. "I didn't kill anyone, but if hypothetically someone did, yeah, maybe he enjoyed it. Maybe he felt like, for the first time in his life, he was actually alive." The interrogation went on. Hours, days, weeks. Detectives asked Ted about every victim, every detail, every moment. But he never fully confessed. He only dropped small hints, gave vague clues, kept playing his psychological game. One of the police psychologists, Dr. Al Carlisle, said after a long interview with him, "This man has no conscience. He can't empathize. He can't feel real love. To him, other human beings are just objects, things to be played with and then thrown away." But Ted Bundy saw himself as a victim. In later interviews, he said, "Ever since I was a kid, I felt like I didn't belong in this world. I was always the outsider, always different. And when I found out my mother lied to me about who I really was, everything fell apart. I didn't know who I was anymore." But none of that convinced anyone. Because millions of people have rough childhoods. Millions are lied to, abandoned, but they don't become serial killers. Ted Bundy chose. He chose to hurt the girls who trusted him. He chose to take their lives. He chose to leave their families in endless pain. During one of the interrogations, a detective asked Ted, "Why did you pick the young ones? Why them?" Ted thought for a moment, then said, "Because they were innocent. Because when I looked at them, I saw the world before it got ruined. They still had hope, still believed the world was a good place. And I wanted to take that away from them." Those words shook even the most hardened detectives. This wasn't just a killer. It was someone who took pleasure in destroying beauty, in crushing hope, in extinguishing light. Another investigator, Bill Hagmeyer from Tacoma Police, tried a different approach. He asked, "Ted, were you a victim too? Did life hurt you?" Ted looked at him, and for the first time, there was something like sadness in his eyes. "Maybe the part of me I never really knew." That was one of the closest moments Ted ever came to confessing. But he never outright said, "Yes, I did it." He always hovered around the edges, half admitting, half denying, locked in a psychological game where he was always the main player. During one of the sessions, a detective laid out a photo of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach on the table and said, "Ted, this girl was only 12. 12 years old. She was a kid. How could you do that to her?" Ted didn't look at the photo. He lowered his head and stayed silent for a few moments, then said, "I don't want to talk about that." Why? Because you know you can't justify it? Because you know, even for you, that one was too much. Ted suddenly stood up, shoving his chair back, shouting, "I said I don't want to talk about that. Get out. All of you, get out." Guards rushed in and calmed him down. Ted sat back down, taking deep breaths, then ran his hand over his face. For the first time, it looked like the mask had cracked. For the first time, there was real pain in his eyes. The detective said quietly, "Ted, if you really feel sorry, if you really want to make things right, at least tell the families where the rest of the bodies are. They deserve to know. They deserve to bury their children." Ted looked up at the ceiling for a moment, then said, "Maybe one day I'll tell, but not now. Now's not the time." He never did. He never told. He never helped the families. Until the very end, Ted Bundy kept control. Control over the information. Control over other people's pain. Control over his own story. After weeks of interrogation, it was finally time for Ted Bundy's trial. A trial that became one of the loudest, most publicized in American history. A trial where Ted Bundy wasn't just the accused, but also his own lawyer. Summer of 1979. Dade County Courthouse, Miami, Florida. The trial of Ted Bundy for the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, and for the attacks on Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, kicked off. The whole world had its eyes on that courtroom. For the first time ever, a trial was being broadcast live on TV. Millions tuned in every day to watch how this handsome, charismatic killer would defend himself. Ted Bundy showed up in court like a movie star. Clean suit, hair slicked, that easy, charming smile. He treated the judge with deference, sparred with the prosecutor, even spoke politely to witnesses. He wanted everyone to see a competent law student, a normal guy, rather than a serial killer. But under that mask sat the same monster, the same man whose hands were stained with the blood of dozens of young women. Judge Edward Coward, an experienced, no-nonsense man, sat on the bench and stared at Ted with a hard look. He knew this case wasn't just another file. It was a test of the justice system. Could a clever, charismatic man manipulate and perform his way out of punishment? Prosecutor Larry Simpson, a big, loud, forceful guy, laid out the evidence piece by piece for the jury. He called witnesses who'd seen Ted at the Florida State dorm that night. He brought in forensic experts who matched the bite marks on Lisa Levy to Ted's teeth. He showed proof Ted had been at the scene, That night, one key witness was Nita Neary, a girl who lived in the sorority house and heard the thumps and screams that night. She took the stand, voice trembling. I heard the pounding. It was awful, like someone hammering wood against something. Then I heard a short, muffled scream. I came out of my room and I saw a man running down the hall. He was dark, but I saw him. He had a stick in his hand. Simpson asked, "Can you point him out here in the courtroom?" Nita looked at Ted. Ted smiled and stared right at her. The same warm smile, that calm gaze. Nita shook. She pointed and said, That's him, I'm sure." Ted nodded slowly and muttered, "No, you're wrong." The jury heard it and made note of it. Next up was Dr. Richard Sovereign, the forensic dentist. He compared Ted's dental cast to the bite marks on Lisa Levy and displayed images showing an exact match. The spacing, the shape of the front teeth, even a broken tooth that lined up perfectly with a bite mark. Sovereign said, "The odds that these marks came from anyone else are 1 in 8 million. Plain and simple, only Mr. Bundy's teeth could have made these marks." A heavy hush fell over the courtroom. Jurors stared at the photos, images that showed how, in Lisa Levy's final moments, Ted Bundy had bitten her, leaving a brutal, intimate mark of violence. Then it was Bundy's turn to question. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked up with total confidence. He looked at Dr. Sovereign and gave a smile. "Doctor, you said the odds are 1 in 8 million. But isn't it possible you could be wrong? Isn't science ever 100%? Sovereign looked at Bundy and answered firmly, "Science is never 100%, Mr. Bundy. But in this case, given the precise match, error is virtually impossible." Bundy nodded as if pondering, then said, "So, you're saying virtually impossible. So there's still a tiny chance you could be wrong, right?" "Yes, but that chance is so vanishingly small, it's not scientifically acceptable." Bundy kept his smile and said, "I just want to make sure the jury understands that even you can't be absolutely certain." Simpson objected. "Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is trying to manipulate the witness." Judge Cowart ruled, "Objection sustained. Mr. Bundy, your questions must be direct and relevant." Bundy nodded and returned to his seat, but he knew what he'd done. He'd planted a seed of doubt, however small and baseless it might be. Summer of 1979. Dade County Courthouse, Miami, Florida. Ted Bundy's trial for the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, and for the attacks on Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, was underway. The whole world was glued to that courtroom. For the first time in history, a trial was being broadcast live on television. Millions tuned in every day to watch how this handsome, charismatic killer would defend himself. Bundy walked into court like a movie star. Clean suit, slick hair, that calm, charming smile. He treated the judge politely, sparred with the prosecutor, and even spoke politely to witnesses. He wanted everyone to see a law student, a respectable man, not a serial killer. But under that mask sat the same monster, the same man whose hands were soaked in the blood of dozens of young women. Judge Edward Cowart, A seasoned, no-nonsense judge sat on the bench staring hard at Bundy. He knew this wasn't just another case. It was a test for the justice system. Could a clever, attractive man get away with manipulation and performance? Prosecutor Larry Simpson, a big, forceful man with a booming voice, laid the evidence out, piece by piece, for the jury. He called witnesses who'd seen Bundy at the sorority house that night. He brought in forensic experts who matched the bite marks on Lisa Levy to Bundy's teeth. He showed evidence putting Bundy at the scene that night. One key witness was Nita Neri. She lived in that sorority house and heard the thumps and screams. On the stand, voice shaking, she said, "I heard pounding, horrible, like someone hammering wood. Then I heard a short, muffled scream. I came out and I saw a man running down the hallway. He was dark, but I saw him. He had a stick." Simpson asked, "Can you point that man out here in the courtroom?" Nita looked at Bundy. Bundy smiled and stared back. Same warm smile, same calm look. Nita trembled, pointed, and said, "That's him, I'm sure." Bundy nodded slowly and muttered, "No, you're wrong." The jury heard it and took note. Next up was Dr. Richard Souverone, the forensic dentist. He compared Bundy's dental cast to the bite marks on Lisa Levy and put images up showing a perfect match: the spacing, the shape of the front teeth, even a broken tooth that lined up exactly with a bite mark. Souverone said, "The chance these marks came from someone else is 1 in 8 million. Plain and simple. Only Mr. Bundy's teeth could have made these marks." A heavy hush fell over the courtroom. Jurors stared at the photos, evidence showing how Bundy had bitten Lisa Levy in her last moments, leaving a brutal, intimate imprint of violence. Then it was Bundy's turn to question. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked up with total confidence. He looked Souverone in the eye and smiled. "Doctor, you said the odds are 1 in 8 million, but couldn't you be wrong? Isn't science ever 100%? Souverone looked at him and answered firmly, "Science is never 100%, Mr. Bundy. But in this case, given the precise match, error is virtually impossible." Bundy nodded like he was thinking, then said, "So you're saying virtually impossible. So there's still a tiny chance you could be wrong, right?" "Yes, but that chance is so vanishingly small, it's not scientifically acceptable." Bundy kept his smile. "I just want to make sure the jury understands that even you can't be absolutely certain." Simpson objected. "Objection, Your Honor. The defendant is trying to manipulate the witness." Judge Cowart ruled, "Objection sustained. Mr. Bundy, your questions must be direct and relevant." Bundy nodded and returned to his seat. He knew what he'd done. He'd planted a seed of doubt, however small and baseless it might be. The trial continued. More witnesses came forward. Students who had seen Bundy that night, police officers who had searched his car, experts who had analyzed biological evidence. Every piece of evidence pointed to one conclusion: Ted Bundy was the killer. But Bundy was still playing his game. He challenged every witness, disputed every piece of evidence, rejected every argument. He moved through the courtroom like a seasoned actor on stage, with television cameras capturing every gesture, every expression. One of the most dramatic moments came when Bundy decided to take the stand himself. He swore to tell the truth, then began speaking. "I was just a law student, an ordinary guy who wanted a good life. I never hurt anyone. All these accusations, all this evidence, they're fabricated. The police decided from the start that I was guilty and arranged all the evidence to fit that narrative." Prosecutor Simpson stood, voice sharp. "Mr. Bundy, you escaped from prison twice. Why would an innocent man run?" Bundy had his answer ready. "Because I knew I was trapped in an unjust system. I feared being convicted without a fair review. I just wanted a chance to prove my innocence." "Then why, after escaping, did you go to Florida and kill again?" "I didn't kill anyone." "Then how did Kimberly Leach's hair end up in your car?" "Maybe someone put it there. Maybe the police planted it themselves." Simpson laughed, a bitter, merciless laugh. "Do you really expect the jury to believe that? That the police conspired against you? You are a serial killer, Mr. Bundy, and everyone here knows it." Bundy stood, voice loud. "I'm innocent. I didn't kill anyone." The judge banged his gavel. "Order, Mr. Bundy, sit down." Bundy panted, eyes red, hands trembling. For the first time, the mask was gone. Everyone could see what lay beneath that charming smile: anger, fear, despair. The trial concluded, and the jury retired to deliberate. Bundy sat in his cell, waiting. He knew what was coming. Yet part of him still hoped. Perhaps, maybe, he could escape. 7 hours later, the jury returned. Judge Cowart asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" The jury foreman stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "And your verdict?" "We find Theodore Robert Bundy guilty on all counts. First-degree murder of Lisa Levy, first-degree murder of Margaret Bowman, and 3 counts of assault with intent to kill." Silence, then crying, the families of the victims finally witnessing justice. Bundy lowered his head. He shed no tears, showed no emotion. He simply sat, staring at his hands. Judge Cowart looked at him. "Mr. Bundy, this court sentences you to death. You will be executed in the electric chair on the day you are notified. May God have mercy on you." Bundy stood, looked at the judge, and smiled, the same cold, empty smile. "Thank you, Your Honor. And you take care as well." He was returned to his cell. The world had seen him. The world had heard the verdict. And the world knew that finally, Ted Bundy would answer for his crimes. But this was only one trial. Another awaited. The trial for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. And this time, there would be no escape. January 1980. Orlando, Florida. The second trial of Ted Bundy began, this time for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who had been abducted from her school and whose body was found weeks later in an abandoned warehouse. This trial was even darker and more painful than the previous one because the victim was a child who just wanted to go to school, learn, play with her friends, and return home safely. The prosecutor this time was Jerry Blair, a tough, serious man who had worked on murder cases for years. From the start, he made it clear he would give Bundy no chance. He wanted to ensure that this time, justice would be fully served. The first witness was Kimberly's mother, Frida Leach. With tear-filled eyes and trembling hands, she took the stand. She looked at the jury and began to speak. Kimberly was my little girl. She was only 12. She loved playing with her dolls, loved drawing, loved reading books. Every morning, she would leave home with a smile and say, "Mom, today will be a good day." And I believed her. But that day, she didn't come home from school. My world ended. Her voice broke. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry. The judge allowed her time, and the courtroom fell silent. Even Ted Bundy lowered his head. Frida continued, "Every night, I lie awake, thinking about her last moments. How scared was she? How much did she suffer? Did she think of me in her final moments? And I will never know the answers to these questions. Because that man," she pointed at Bundy, "he stole her from me. He took my daughter and he killed her." The jury stared at Bundy. He showed no reaction, simply sitting with his hands on the table, staring blankly ahead. Prosecutor Blair called the next witness, a student who had seen Kimberly on the day she was abducted. A 14-year-old boy named Jimmy testified, "I saw Kimberly walking toward the parking lot. A man was beside her, saying something. Kimberly paused, like she didn't want to go with him. But the man grabbed her hand and forced her into the car. I thought maybe he was her father or a relative, but later I realized he wasn't." Blair asked, "Can you identify that man?" Jimmy looked at Bundy. Bundy smiled, a gentle, practiced smile, the same one he had used countless times. But Jimmy trembled. "Yes, that's him." Next came a key witness, a forensic expert who had examined Kimberly's body. He explained that the body was in an advanced state of decomposition, but signs of severe violence were evident. Skull fractures, multiple injuries across the body, and indications that she had suffered greatly before death. One jury member, a middle-aged woman, could not hold back her tears. She grabbed a handkerchief and wiped her face. The thought that a 12-year-old girl had endured such suffering was unbearable. Blair turned to Bundy. "Mr. Bundy, don't you have any shame, any remorse? That girl was just a child." Bundy looked at him calmly. "I have nothing to regret, because I didn't do this." Blair slammed his fist on the table. "Lies. All the evidence points to you. Kimberly's hair in your car, witnesses who saw you, the route you traveled, everything points to you." Bundy smiled. Maybe the police set up another conspiracy. Maybe they're trying to frame someone to satisfy the public. This time, even the judge was angry. "Mr. Bundy, I warn you to show respect to this court and to the victim's family." Bundy nodded, but kept his smile. He still thought he could play his game, still thought he could maintain control. But this time, the jury had had enough. They had seen the evidence, heard the witnesses, witnessed the tears of a mother who had lost her daughter. They had made their decision. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom. The foreman stood and said, "We find Theodore Robert Bundy guilty of first-degree murder of Kimberly Diana Leach, and we recommend that his punishment be the death penalty." Frida Leach, Kimberly's mother, stood up and shouted, "Yes! Yes! Thank God!" She began to cry, but this time it was a cry of relief, a cry that came after months of waiting, finally seeing justice served. Ted Bundy lifted his head and stared at the ceiling. He took a deep breath and then smiled, a smile that no one could read. Perhaps he was laughing at himself, perhaps thinking about his life, or perhaps simply accepting that the game was over. The judge, once again, handed down the death sentence. Ted Bundy now had 2 death sentences, and there was no way out. But Bundy had not yet surrendered. He began writing numerous letters to lawyers, to judges, to human rights organizations. He claimed his trial was unfair, that the evidence was fabricated, that he was innocent. But no one listened. The world no longer believed his lies. Years passed. Bundy remained in prison, waiting for the day his death sentence would be carried out. During this time, he spoke with psychologists, gave interviews, even read books. He tried to present himself as a reformed man, someone who was remorseful, someone who now understood his mistakes. But in one interview, when asked, "Are you truly remorseful?" he paused for a moment and then said, "I regret that I got caught, but no, I am not remorseful for what I did, because that was a part of me. That was what I was meant to do." This statement revealed everything. Even in the final days of his life, Ted Bundy could not truly grasp humanity. He was still the same monster, only now trapped in a cage. In 1986, a journalist named Stephen Michaud conducted a long interview with Bundy. In that interview, Bundy spoke about his victims for the first time, not directly, but using the third person, as if talking about someone else. He said, "Imagine someone like me, feeling separate from the world since childhood, feeling like they never truly belong. That person might look for a way to feel power, to feel control. And maybe that way is taking someone's life, because in that moment, you have complete power. You are God." Michaud asked, "And this feeling, how long does it last?" Bundy smiled. "Very little. Just a few moments, and then you're empty again, and you have to do it again, like an addiction. It's never enough." The interview was chilling. For the first time, Bundy, even indirectly, admitted that he was a serial killer. Someone who took pleasure in killing. Someone who could not stop. But time was running out. Ted Bundy's death sentence had been finalized, and the execution date was approaching. He knew there was no way to escape this time. He knew that justice would finally catch him. In his final days, Bundy began speaking with detectives. He said he was willing to provide information about his other victims, those who had not yet been found, whose families had waited for years. But he had one condition. He wanted his execution date delayed. The and the victims' families were hesitant. Could they trust Ted Bundy? Did he truly have information? Or was he just playing a game to buy time? Some detectives met with him. Bundy sat down and began to talk. He named girls who had disappeared years ago, whose fates were unknown. He described locations, forests, mountains, rivers, places where he had hidden bodies. But he never told everything. He always kept something hidden, always held back a piece of the puzzle, because as long as he had information, he had value. And as long as he had value, perhaps he could survive. But the court had made its decision. Ted Bundy's execution date was set. January 24th, 1989. January 23rd, 1989. One day before Ted Bundy's execution. Florida State Prison. In Stark. The air was cold, the sky gray and overcast. Outside the prison, hundreds had gathered. Some were families of the victims, there to witness justice. Some were curious onlookers, and some were protesting the death penalty. Inside, Ted Bundy sat in his solitary cell. He knew he had only hours left, alive. He stared at the wall, at the images running through his mind. The faces of the girls he had killed, the smiles he had stolen, the lives he had destroyed. Was he remorseful? Was he afraid? That day, his final visitor arrived. A lawyer named Jim Coleman, who had spent years trying to overturn Bundy's death sentence. He entered the cell and sat down. Bundy looked at him and smiled. A tired smile, one that held no energy. "Hello, Jim. Here to say goodbye?" Jim shook his head. "Ted, I tried until the very end, but there's nothing left to do. The Supreme Court denied your last appeal." Bundy chuckled, quietly, bitterly. I knew from the start it would end this way. "Ted, you can still confess. You can tell the families exactly what happened, where the rest of your victims are. Maybe it'll give them some peace." Bundy shook his head. "No, I don't want to. They have no right to demand anything from me. I get to choose until the end." Jim exhaled deeply. He had worked with Bundy for years and knew that even in his final hours, he remained the same selfish, cold man. "Ted, are you afraid of dying?" Bundy paused. He looked at the small window in his cell, the one that let in just a sliver of light. He said softly, "No, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm just afraid of being forgotten." Those words, perhaps the only honest words Ted Bundy ever spoke, revealed the truth. He did not want to be forgotten. He wanted his name to endure forever, even as a monster. Night fell. Bundy ate his last meal, steak, French fries, and a cup of coffee. He ate calmly, as if it were an ordinary night. He even joked and spoke with the guards, as if trying to maintain the mask until the very end. Midnight passed, 1 o'clock, 2, 3, and finally 4:30 a.m. execution time. The guards entered Bundy's cell. One said, "Ted, it's time." Bundy stood. He put on the white suit that had been prepared for him. He fixed his hair, looked in the mirror, and smiled. One last smile for himself. They led him out of the cell and toward the execution chamber. The hallway was dark, lit only by a few lamps. The sound of Bundy's steps and the guard's footsteps echoed through the still night. He walked with steady, calm steps, as if heading to an ordinary appointment. They entered the chamber. There stood a large wooden chair, the electric chair. A chair where dozens had sat before Bundy and lost their lives. The chair was clean, meticulously prepared, with the electrical equipment nearby. On the other side of the room was a small window. Witnesses stood behind it. Families of the victims, journalists, officials. Everyone had come to see this moment. Bundy looked at the chair. He took a deep breath and sat down. The guards strapped his arms and legs tightly with leather straps. His chest was secured, his head fixed. A metal cap was placed on his head, connected to the electrodes. A priest entered and stood beside him. "Mr. Bundy, do you have any final words?" Bundy paused. He looked at the window, at the faces of the victims' families, staring at him with eyes full of rage and tears. He knew they were waiting for him to say something. Maybe an apology, maybe a confession. But Ted Bundy, even in his final moments, could not do it. The priest offered a final prayer. Then the warden gave the signal. The executioner, a man whose face was hidden, placed his hand on the switch, and at 7:06 a.m. on January 24th, 1989, the current surged through Ted Bundy's body. His body convulsed, his muscles contracted, his eyes closed, his hands clenched, and then silence. 2 minutes later, the doctor entered and checked his pulse. He shook his head and said, "He is dead." Ted Bundy, the serial killer who had murdered more than 30 young women, the man who had escaped prison twice, the man who stole hearts with his charm and smile only to steal lives, was finally dead. Outside the prison, the crowd erupted. Some cheered, some wept, some stood silently, staring at the sky. One mother, whose daughter had been killed by Bundy, fell to her knees, lifted her hands to the heavens, and whispered, "Finally, finally, it's over." But was it really over? Could Ted Bundy's death heal the pain of the families who had suffered for years? Was this justice, or merely an ending? Bundy's body was transferred to the morgue. An autopsy was performed, his brain examined. Psychologists wanted to see if there was anything in its structure that could explain his behavior. But they found nothing unusual. Bundy's brain was like that of any other person. No tumors, no abnormalities, no physical marker that could explain why he became a serial killer. This discovery was shocking to many. It meant that Ted Bundy and serial killers like him are not necessarily biologically different. They choose, they decide to take the path of violence, control, and murder. And that reality is far more terrifying than any scientific explanation. After the autopsy, Bundy's body was cremated. His ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean, the same ocean where he once vacationed, perhaps even near where some of his victims were hidden. No gravestone, no marker, no place to visit as a memorial. He was forgotten, at least physically, just as he had wanted. But his name was never forgotten. Ted Bundy's name is forever etched in history. Not as a hero, not as a genius, but as a monster. A reminder that sometimes the devil smiles, shakes hands, and earns trust. And that is precisely why he is so dangerous. But Ted Bundy's death was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of another chapter. A chapter in which society tried to understand what had happened, why it had happened, and how to prevent it from happening again. Psychologists, sociologists, and investigators began to deeply examine Bundy's life. They looked at his childhood, his relationships, his behavioral patterns, and they realized that Bundy was a classic example of an antisocial personality with psychopathic traits. Dr. Al Carlisle, a psychologist who had interviewed Bundy for years, wrote in an article, "Ted Bundy lacked the capacity for empathy. He could not feel the pain of others. To him, humans were merely tools to satisfy his own needs." From childhood, he learned that survival required wearing a mask, pretending. And that mask became so good that even those closest to him couldn't see what was hidden beneath it. Yet the central question remained, was Ted Bundy like this from the beginning? Or did the events of his life push him toward this path? Some experts argued that Bundy had a disorder from birth, perhaps a specific genetic combination, perhaps brain development issues. They pointed to his childhood behaviors, petty thefts, sneaking around houses at night, inability to form deep relationships. Others said the environment played a critical role. A violent grandfather, a depressed grandmother, the lie about his true parentage, feelings of abandonment, the emotional heartbreak with Stephanie. All these were layers that pushed him toward darkness. The truth is, no one really knows. No one can say for certain why Ted Bundy became what he became. Perhaps it was a combination of all these factors. Perhaps he was just unlucky, born with the wrong genes, in the wrong family, at the wrong time. But what is clear is that Bundy made choices. He chose to harm the girls who trusted him. He chose to take their lives, and he had to be held accountable for those choices. After Bundy's death, the victims' families began to speak. They told the stories of their daughters, girls with dreams, girls who wanted to become doctors, teachers, artists, girls whose entire futures were stolen by Bundy. Linda Healy, a psychology student who wanted to help children, was Bundy's first victim. She slept in her room at night and never woke up. Her family waited years before her body was found. Her mother later said, "I never understood why Linda, why my daughter. She did no harm to anyone. She only wanted to help. And this man, the devil, took her from us." Denise Nasland, a girl who loved nature and music, had told her mother the day before she disappeared, "Mom, I feel like today is going to be a good day." That day became the last day of her life. Her mother later said, "I think about that sentence every day." As she left a friend's house, Bundy saw her, followed her, and killed her. Her father later said, Karen wanted to bring justice to others, but she herself became a victim of injustice. And Kimberly Leach, a small girl of just 12 years old, had dreams that would never come true. She wanted to become a teacher, see the world, grow up, and have a family. But all of it was destroyed in a single day, in a single moment, by a man who only thought of himself. Her mother later said, "I can never forgive him. I cannot forgive that he took my daughter from me. He didn't just kill Kimberly. He killed a part of me as well." These stories, these memories, these pains, these are what must be remembered. Not Ted Bundy's smile, not his charisma, not his intelligence, but the girls he killed, the families he destroyed, the lives he stole. In the years after Bundy's death, media began analyzing and exploring his life. Books were written, movies made, documentaries aired, and unfortunately, in some of these works, Ted Bundy was portrayed as a charming, charismatic figure, a depiction that enraged the victims' families. One of them said, "Why are you turning this man into a hero? Why are you showing his charm? He was a monster. He killed dozens of people. Why should his name be kept alive?" It's an important question. Why are we fascinated by serial killers? Why do we read their stories, watch movies about them, talk about them? Some say it's because we want to understand how a human can be so evil. We want to know if there were warning signs, if there were ways to prevent it. We want to feel safe knowing how these people think. Others argue that it's just our morbid curiosity. We like to be scared. We like to look into the darkness, as long as we ourselves are safe. Whatever the reason, the truth is that Ted Bundy is forever a part of our popular culture. And that's tragic, because it means he got what he wanted. He was not forgotten. But what should not be forgotten are the victims. They must be remembered, not him. They must be honored, not him. They must be kept alive in memories, in stories, in the hearts of those who loved them. Years after Ted Bundy's execution, detectives and researchers were still searching for the answers that remained. Before his death, Bundy had claimed to have killed more than 30 people, but only a limited number of his victims had been identified. Many families were still waiting for news of their daughters, sisters, friends who had disappeared years before. Police departments across different states began reviewing old cases. They looked for patterns that resembled Bundy's methods. Girls with long brown hair, disappearances at night, locations where Bundy had been at the time. and they found cases he might have been responsible for. One such case involved a girl named Anne Marie Burr, an 18-year-old who disappeared in 1974 in New Jersey while hitchhiking. No one ever saw her again. Years later, when police retraced Bundy's movements, they realized he had been. Another case involved a girl named Rita Carlton, a 23-year-old who vanished in 1975 in Vermont. She didn't return home from work, and no one knew her fate. Her family searched for years without any leads. Now, investigators believe she might also have been one of Bundy's victims. But Bundy never confirmed these cases. He kept the information to himself until his last moments. Even in death, he wanted control. Control over the story, over the family's pain, over the truth. One detective who spent years on Bundy's cases later said, "Ted Bundy was a player. He enjoyed deceiving people. Even in prison, he was still playing the game. He'd say, 'Maybe one day I'll tell everything.' But that day never came. He knew that as long as he had information, he had value. And this is one of the greatest tragedies of the story. Families who never knew the fate of their loved ones. Mothers who look at the door every night, hoping their daughters will return. Brothers still searching for answers. All of them secondary victims of Bundy, victims he didn't directly kill, but whose lives he destroyed. Yet Bundy's case isn't just about the victims. It's about a system that had multiple chances to stop him and failed. In 1975, when Bundy was first arrested for the kidnapping of Carol Durange, police had enough evidence to link him to other crimes. But due to legal problems, lack of coordination between states, and limited resources, it wasn't done. Bundy escaped again and killed more. When he escaped from a Colorado prison, the system failed once more. Guards were negligent, security was insufficient, and Bundy was able to jump out a window and flee. As a result, girls in Florida lost their lives. Girls who would still have been alive if the system had worked properly. These systemic failures led to reforms after Bundy's death. The justice system began cooperating more between states. National databases were created to track crimes. Prison security was strengthened, and police received training to identify serial killers. Yet, even with all these reforms, serial killers still exist. Girls still go missing. Families are still waiting for answers. Because the truth is, Bundy was not alone. He was one of many, and unfortunately, one of many more will follow. What we can learn from Ted Bundy's story is that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they smile. Sometimes they are charming. Sometimes they are even kind. Sometimes they are your neighbor, your coworker, or even your friend. And that's exactly why we must remain vigilant. We must listen to our instincts. If someone makes us feel unsafe, if someone wants trust too quickly, if someone behaves strangely, we must pay attention, because Bundy worked with exactly these tools: trust, charm, and charisma. Elizabeth Kendall, a woman who had been in a relationship with Bundy for years without knowing who he truly was, later wrote a book called The Phantom Beside Me. In it, she explained how Bundy had managed to deceive her, how he maintained his mask, and how she had never even suspected the truth.